Another thing I noticed on the website, as far as gun ownership, I saw there was one bullet that said the goal is to advance inclusive and safe ownership, and then maybe a few bullets later, the term levying anti-gun legislation was used. So I was just curious as to what your sort of your stance on gun ownership, gun control, gun rights, etc. What sort of is your stance on that?
Right. So it's very interesting because a lot has changed for me just on a very personal level. But I am very supportive of the right to bear arms. I know that, for me, looking at it on a very personal level, this summer, after the unjust murder of George Floyd, I think a lot of people, especially a lot of Black and Brown people, our fear levels started to go up. When we saw what happened, the terrorist attack, attempted terrorist attack, on the Capitol, and we saw the lack of accountability, for it as we continue to see even post my brother's murder, even post the unjust murder of George Floyd, when we see no police accountability, which equates to and results in police officers, in my opinion, feeling empowered to continue to, take the lives of individuals unjustly. When we see community members, that are so quick to act aggressively, whether it's verbally or physically towards Black and Brown community members. And again, there's no accountability. When we hear of gun shops, during that time, selling out, of their guns, and a lot of us, like, okay, we're not buying them, so where they're going. It brought this upcoming summer a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety, for a lot of people. And I believe that, every Virginian, every individual should have the right to bear arms. I do believe that we need to regulate, to a certain degree, the grade of firearms that's being, obtained. And I also, couldn't talk about firearms without talking about, we hear a lot of legislators talk about crime, within some of our communities. And a lot of times they go for, we need to, enact legislation that does not enable individuals to obtain or so easily obtain firearms. And I'm from New York. Let me just say that again. And what I will say is that, to me, enacting more legislation regarding firearms is kind of like a restraining order. A person that truly has motives, to cause harm. We think of domestic violence is like a person who truly has motives to obtain a gun. If they really want to, they can. Throwing a piece of paper and saying, but it's the law, or I have a restraining order, isn't going to stop it. A person who, we can't wipe out, there's no legislation that will be able to remove all, personally owned guns, whether it's registered or not registered. There's something called the black market. So we have to start getting to the why variable. And that's something I don't hear any legislators talk about. When we talk about the crimes within our communities, last month I went to a vigil of a young lady, Miss Hill, and her 3-month-old, who were murdered. They were killed by a community member. Again, it's not just the person needs to be held accountable, but we must start taking more proactive approaches and get into the why variables that some of these, acts of violence and gun crimes are happening in the first place. Again, we cannot remove all guns. That's not realistic. We cannot 100% prevent guns from getting into the wrong hands. But what we can do is take proactive approaches, help people to address their mental health, situations that may put them at a higher likelihood to commit some of these acts. What we can do is address the continuous generational poverty in some of our communities that keep a lot of our community members in survival mode. So, again, I support people being able to legally bear arms. I do not support people having some of these high military grade, firearms, as I personally do not see how, why, or where that is appropriate. As an educator, I have seen too many times news headlines of individuals coming into school, with firearms, that are high grade, and taking many lives. And so, that's where I stand at it as far as legislation is concerned, and personally.
Yeah, I really like that answer. I think most of the time when you hear politicians talk about it, it's either all the way one way, you can have whatever gun you want, or all the way the other way, like you're not going to be able to buy a gun unless you're an angel type deal. So I really appreciate the perspective of kind of like one side is kind of right and the other side is also kind of right, and that at some point we have to use our brains and realize that the black market exists, and if somebody really wants one, then they'll probably be able to get one.